Speaker, I rise to make my contribution to this 2013 budget, which was presented on March 25th by the Honorable Dr. Ashin Singh. And I want to begin by saying that this budget has a crisis, not only here in the National Assembly, but also throughout there. I think it's unfortunate that the government side believes its own propaganda, that everything is hunky-dory in relation to this budget. I will advise that that side of the House take more time to go on the streets and talk to people individually, not in orchestrated meetings, but in meetings in which it is that you will be able to give frank opinions of what people feel. And you will be surprised what people feel. Mr. Speaker, I want to begin my contribution to allude to two developments which took place here during the Honorable Finance Minister's presentation. The first has to do with the broadcast of his presentation via the public address system outside of the Parliament building. And I believe, sir, that the second issue, which I will also refer to when juxtaposed against the first, will expose the government's undemocratic behavior. The decision to broadcast from the National Assembly assumes tremendous importance, particularly in the context of a motion that was passed in this House on Friday, August 10, 2012, which resolved that this National Assembly declares that the right of citizens to assemble and to demonstrate peacefully should not be hindered by the Ghana Police Force or any other agency or institution of the state. Secondly, the Ghana Police Force shall relocate its barricades so as to allow freedom of assembly within a closer proximity of the National Assembly building. And third, the Parliament Office makes arrangements for the broadcast of National Assembly sittings in the environs of the National Assembly. It cannot be overstressed, Mr. Speaker, that the resolve clause of motion I refer to calls for three distinct courses of action, which are intended to help to enshrine democracy in this country of ours. You will recall that during the debate of the motion, the Minister of Home Affairs attempted to belittle the proposal to broadcast from the National Assembly building by claiming it would be a nuisance and disruptive to agencies and organizations in close proximity to the National Assembly, including the sittings of the Assembly. What has transpired is the system was used successfully and the Minister was proven to be wrong. My only complaint insofar as the broadcast was concerned was that little or no advance publicity was given to the public about its implementation. While offering congratulations to you, the clerk and the staff, I'm compelled to say that I hope we will now move to institutionalize the arrangement and further. I hope it is not the intention to broadcast now and in the future only selected members' presentations. So if that is the intention, Parliament Office will be guilty of aiding and abetting a crime against the people of the country and making a mockery of the third resolve clause in this motion. Already we have seen that the only Finance Minister's speech has been broadcast, thereby making a mockery of the motion. As I said during the debate on the motion, people want to know what the representatives are saying when they are in here, and nothing should preclude them from knowing being involved in the process. This becomes even more important in light of how some members' contributions are being dealt with by NCM and other media houses. Parliament, sir, is obliged to do all within its powers to give real meaning to the motion. Mr. Speaker, the intention was never about partial implementation of the motion, but implementation of it in all of its aspects. It is clear that clauses 1 and 2 of the motion are yet to be implemented in keeping with its spirit and intent. The barriers around the Assembly are more restrictive than before. We in this Honourable House have to be concerned about the lengths the government is prepared to go to in order to recognize and trample on the democratic rights of citizens. That behavior makes a mockery of the Finance Minister's boast of the efforts of the People's Progressive Party civic government to build a better Guyana for all Guyanese. The second issue I wish to report is in relation to the Finance Minister's lament in his speech of the positions the majority members of this House have taken in respect to issues of national importance over the months of the life of this 10th Parliament. He dared to lecture us on the wisdom of our actions, and in his arrogance, demonstrated a pronounced weakness in the thinking of the PPPC. That is, their failure to come to grips with the reality of the situation. The PPPC credits every action of the majority in the House as an obsession by the majority to prove the importance of what they like to call the one-seat majority. They talk as if that one seat is represented by a single vote. The reality is far different from what they pretend and would like their constituents to believe. If one thing is true, it is that on November 20th, 2011, a shift took place in the voting pattern in Indiana, which sent shockwaves down the spine of the leaders of the PPC. That shame, Mr. Speaker, saw more than 10,000 persons, not one. I repeat, Mr. Speaker, more than 10,000 persons abandoning the PPPC and voting against that party. The leaders of the PPPC are trying their best to understand what that development means for their future existence. They are wondering how many more will abandon them in the months ahead. But like the proverbial ostrich, which hides its head in the sand, they seem not to want to understand that in taking the course actions, they took, that 10,000 more voters had demonstrated the extent to which they had become fed up with that party and had deliberately aligned themselves with forces they have confidence in. By doing so, those forces took a conscious decision to mandate the majority the course of action that irretrievably changed the status quo. What is taking place in this National Assembly is therefore what the people want. Some people call it the fascinating name people's power. By whatever name it is called, it represents a determination by the people of the country that what existed prior to November 28, 2011 will no longer prevail. Let me take this opportunity to offer some advice to the Honorable Finance Minister of this minority government. You should get out of your ivory tower and go on the streets. You'll be surprised when you hear what people are saying. You will hear them saying to the majority that in the PPPC, we have a criminal cabal and a dictatorship to dismantle, and dismantle it must be. Mr. Speaker, we who sit on this side of the House are obliged to respond to the demands of the majority of the populace. The Finance Minister and the rest of the leaders of the PPPC and the remainder who sit on the opposite side of the House are better get used to that idea and do so quickly. Mr. Speaker, it seems to me that the Finance Minister of the government's concept of democracy is that the government talks and cracks the whip and the majority jumps. That is why even when he talks about consultation, he honors the principles of it in the breach. If consultation enjoyed a high meaningful priority on this government's agenda, we would have been dealing with a budget today which I'm sure will not have been as contentious as this one is. As the situation now stands, the budget in its present form must not suffice. It must be changed to reflect the true situation in the country, or must be voted down. Mr. Speaker, I want to touch on public sector wages, salaries, and other benefits. Mr. Speaker, as I sat listening to the Minister of Finance on various plans for 2013 and March 25th, it occurred to me that he was engaged in a lengthy exercise, one that consumed more than 3 hours of spewing what I described as pure rhetoric, hot air. One could not escape the feeling that as we sat through his web of fantasia, he was engaged in rehashing a set of principles which we have been making year after year. What was even more disturbing to me, not surprising, was that he completely ignored the proposals made to him by AP and UNAFC for relief to the most vulnerable categories in the society. Sir, it boggles the mind that throughout his lengthy discourse, he gave no real thought to entertaining the earning power for that large group of people who fall within the category known as public sector workers. When will they be improved? Is it the government's intention to address these grave anomalies? The minister, however, did was to play his usual con game when he tried to give the impression that workers earning in excess of $50,000 per month, which went from year of income 2020 fit from a huge package of relief as reflected in the reduction of personal income tax, from 30% to 30%. What the Honorable Finance Minister deliberately failed to do was to point out that there is a very large number of workers in this country who earn far less than $50,000 per month. And for those who are in excess of that amount, in money terms, the astronomical relief he alluded to amounts to 3 1/3 cents in every dollar they will be required to pay. With an inflation rate of 3.5%, Mr. Speaker, the low-paid worker is not better off in real terms. Mr. Speaker, there can be no substitute for immediate increases both in the earning power to cushion the effect in the rising cost of living and improving the allowances and other conditions of workers. Let us not pretend otherwise. The much sought after increases in salaries and allowances should be seen by the government as an investment in people and not merely as a payoff. It endows workers with the capacity to address, albeit minimally, the problems posed by the escalated prices in goods and services, which occur with great rapidity. There is increased allowances that nurses and other personnel employed in the health sector have been clamoring for 20 years after the last measly increase was given. Why are retired nurses who are reemployed and I believe contracted are not being paid the gratuity and other benefits paid to other contract workers? Are they in fact contracted? If they are, the government is obliged to pay them their entitlements because they are giving service over and beyond the call-out duty in an effort to give meaning to the troubled patient care delivery system. What about the conditions of work for all other public servants? When will they be improved? Is it that government's intention is to address these grave anomalies only when strike action is taken? I submit, therefore, sir, that the failure to address these questions with the urgency they deserve is unconscionable, as intended to impose greater burdens on an already enslaved group of workers. In that situation, Mr. Speaker, it is incumbent on the majority of this House to encourage and be part of workers' efforts to improve their lot. On the question of governance, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the Minister of Finance in his budget speech devoted only 2 paragraphs to the very important issue of governance. In the one-sentence first paragraph, he tersely stated that events which have unfolded since the November 20, 2011 general and regional elections, particularly in the National Assembly, have tested the mettle of governance systems and political maturity. The second paragraph merely referred to ongoing reviews of Guyana's treaty obligations, a subject which could be better treated in an earlier section of the minister's speech dealing with foreign relations. This section on governance merited much more extensive treatment, since with good governance, Guyana's growth rate would probably have been in the double digits, saying that the economy is moving from a very low economic base. The minister is reluctant to deal with the subject of governance because of the indefensible behavior of his party, which, having lost its parliamentary majority, seeks to make the opposition ineffective by tying the latter up in the courts, and the president, acting like a general secretary, rather than a head of state, refused to sign any bill with which his party is not in agreement. Guyana will have seen the more stable society and welcoming environment for domestic and foreign investors, and a more attractive alternative location for those skilled and semi-skilled would-be immigrants if the president, soon after the last elections, had sought to engage the opposition in inclusive governance arrangements or some form of genuine shared governance. Rather, there was a rush to form a one-party executive government in keeping with the 20-year-old tradition of winner-take-all. Good governance relates to the effective implementation of democratic practices, the full participation of all stakeholders, political, civic, and private sector, fair and equitable treatment for all, including non-traditional supporters, transparency and effective disclosure, and regular and timely reporting to those whom the elected are supposed to be representing, especially information concerning the results of feasibility studies and related choice and identity of foreign joint venture partners, accountability, particularly with respect to the determination of project costs, and a level playing field related to the bidding and tendering process. What has taken place since 1992 is a refutation of all these principles. Despite the solemn agreements under the 1999 Hartmanson Accord, the current regime persists in blocking the formation of a public procurement commission, and so kickbacks continue to proliferate, with recipients of the illicit gains sheltering under a non-functioning asset declaration system and a non-existent integrity commission. The resulting corporate corruption accounts for a significant loss in Guyana's potential rate of economic growth. This loss is not reduced, as perverse thinkers would want to believe, but magnified by a suspicious lack of enthusiasm about going after known drug lords masquerading as businessmen. Public sector workers' interests are not being served, since the Public Service Commission, Police Service Commission, Teaching Service Commission, Services Commission, and Judicial Services Commission exist only in name, with the government imposing arbitrary and discriminatory contract and non-contract employment conditions and levels of remuneration devoid of opportunities for bargaining by the workers' representatives. In addition, senior appointments at the various government agencies are based on party loyalty rather than merit and professional qualifications, resulting in a loss of operational efficiency. Merit and professional qualifications are not a major requirement for promotion, a classic example being the position of Auditor General. In certain cases, the favored are not fired, or if they are fired, not placed before the courts despite gross financial misconduct. For example, at NCM, similar party loyalty buttressed by strong bouts of cronyism accounts for the grotesquely unfair nature of the recent distribution of radio license and related frequencies. Non-adherence to rule of law has therefore become the norm. Outrageous examples of flouting of the law abound, including failure to implement court compensation awards for public officials' misconduct and deliberate misinterpretation of the Chief Justice's decision concerning the ability of Parliament to make amendments to the budget. Even more criminal is the government failure to recognize the dictates of the Guyana Constitution with respect to the financing of independent agencies such as GCOM, the strict conditions for access to the contingency fund, and the need for all revenues, including those of the parallel treasury, that is NISL, and Lotto and GMC funds, to be placed in the consolidated fund. In this regard, the current Minister of Finance needs to be disciplined by this House for gross violations of the Constitution. This conduct seems to know no bounds or any sense of professional decency. How can a finance minister be chairman of NISL, and therefore, in fact, he is reporting to and advising his very self? This is an absurdity. And how can someone remain as Minister of Finance when his wife is one of the main officials responsible for auditing the state's finances? This is the conflict of interest should be clear to all and sundry. The truth is that every decision of this government is informed by arrogance and the expectation that an ever loyal and partisan constituency will return it to power. Consultation is not its watchword. Thus, for example, attempts could have been made to increase the electricity tariff in Linden and appropriate the Pleasance Community Center playfield without any consultation with the community. And a Minister of Works could take it upon himself to walk into the state-owned radio station and order competition winning calypso to be taken up there because he didn't blend the lyrics. For the other consideration of that work, including the Association of Calypsonians. This is a reflection of the outrageously partisan nature of the state-owned media. But in a more general sense, there is clear need for a ministerial code of conduct. What is also required is a sharpened awareness of ministerial responsibility, as evidenced, for example, by the uncaring reaction to the tragic shootings of peaceful demonstrators in Georgetown and Linden. Finally, government needs a complete revamping of its governance framework. Power needs to be decentralized at both the central and local government levels. At the central level, the 1980 Constitution needs further amendment including diminution of the powers of the office of president. In addition, critical institutions are required to be established or strengthened in order to provide much needed checks and balances. At the local government level, there is need for strengthened and extensive reform, including a diminution of the powers of the local government minister and a strengthening of regional and municipal powers vis-a-vis those of the central government. While this power under minority executive government facilitates a structural change, or will it continue to stymie constitutional progress? Above all, the plural society that is Guyana requires a new paradigm of political cooperation and an attitudinal transformation, particularly on the part of those who have been in office for the last 21 years and who deserve or fear the grade of death as far as good governance is concerned. Mr. Speaker, on corruption, on the matter of corruption, I want to say this. When I listened to the junior finance minister speak to government's proposals to address the question of corruption, I wondered which planet he came from. It is clear to me that he does not understand that when you are part of the problem, you cannot be part of the solution. Listening to him, I got the impression that he has promised a miracle to resolve this tremendous crisis. It seems as if he has not learned his lesson. He ought to know since November 28, 2011, when he promised the PPPC that with Jesus' assistance, he will deliver Guyana to them and fail, that he is incapable of delivering miracles.
I remember, it was quite a notorious statement, and that would not be accurate.
Exactly.
And so if we were to make a reference to the statement, let us be accurate. I think what the minister publicly said was that if Jesus was in Guyana, we would be voting. That was what was said. So if we could afford to make a reference, let us be accurate.
Mr. Speaker, when I listened to him, I got the impression that he was informed that Jesus would have been by his side delivering. And
that is a fair inference that you may draw. Yes. And so you may put it out there.
Mr. Speaker, corruption is institutionalized in this society, and the establishment of an internal audit department and conducting workshops with stakeholders will not allow for its eradication. The way to go is for the government to start by stopping the attempts to deceive people about the way forward. They must put in place the much needed procurement commission to oversee the award of contracts, establish the National Assembly Budget Office to oversee how appropriations are being dealt with, and consult with genuine patriots on the other mechanisms that are required to deal with the problems and implement the proposals they make. Mr. Speaker, as is normally the case, the reliefs which have been identified will benefit those who already live in great comfort and place the disadvantaged in an even more disadvantageous position. It is worth noting that among the proposals for improving the living standards of the poor and the powerless, from the majority side of the House, are recommendations for the reduction of the VAT and increasing old age benefits to $15,000 per month. These have been ignored, while benefits to Codies and friends have been increased. For example, the reduction of the property tax will mostly benefit the property class. Mr. Speaker, I know that the minister spent a lot of time talking about poverty alleviation. And I wondered the $1.1 billion appropriation for the Ministry of Education school feeding program for school children come the cost of providing to those children in the coast whose parents are unable to provide a meal at lunchtime, as was recommended by the APN via me a few months ago. Let me remind this House that I had brought to the attention of the National Assembly and the Acting Minister of Education, the Honorable Dr. Frank Anthony, a situation which indicated that a large number of young male and female students on the coast are without meals at lunchtime and are forced to beg and in some cases steal to satisfy their hunger. As a result, they are exposed to the demands for sex by some so-called benefactors. I had requested that a pilot study be undertaken in Georgetown to ascertain the validity of the concerns I expressed. The acting minister pointed to the milk and biscuits distribution as government's attempt to address the problem and had requested that I provide details of this incident so he could check. But I told him the best source of information is the recommended pilot study. My question at this time is, has a pilot study been undertaken? If not, why not? Let me make the point.
Honorable member, before you go on to make the point, your time has elapsed. There has to be an application.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the member be given 5 minutes to conclude.
Thank you.
Let me make the point that while the milk and biscuits distribution provides some form of relief, it is not given to each child and is not a substitute for a hot meal at lunchtime. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, how many ministers in this House will allow their children to consume a meal of milk and biscuits every day? Mr. Speaker, this matter should be of great concern to the ministry, and steps should already have been taken to address the problem. We cannot pretend to be concerned about the plight of young people, and when information is provided which underscores the depths of depravity in the society, we pass above the others. We talk about the high rate of pregnancy in schools, and then we refuse to identify with the situation, which points to one of the reasons why pregnancy of more female students and buggery of our young male students is as high as it is in the school system. I believe, sir, that the majority in this House will really support an appropriation which is intended to address the problems of providing a hot meal at lunchtime to each needy child throughout the school system. I therefore want to use this opportunity to call on the Finance Minister and the Minister of Education to address this oversight of the 2013 budget allocations. Mr. Speaker, I know that the APNU's and the AFC's regional representatives have spoken eloquently on the matters of local government, and so that I will not touch that. But I was not here to hear the minister's presentation, Mr. Gatapasar's presentation. But I was wondering if it is that he has dealt with the troubling question of the Ario Harsawak and his delinquencies in relation to his handling of the resources. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I want to say two things. First, some home truths. Guyanese are surviving not because of the so-called stable economic environment, but because of their wits combined with methods flows, fortuitous foreign investments related to high commodity prices and illicit proceeds from the drug trade. Guyanese are surviving in gold mining activities in the forbidden interior terrain, not because of government provision of access roads and other infrastructure, but because of favorable international prices. Guyanese are surviving not because of government provision of basic needs, but in spite of wasteful, corrupt and distorted government expenditure, including notable white elephants. Guyanese are barely surviving in the hotel industry, not with the help of any government subsidies, but with the threat of government's market finances crowding them out of the industry. This government is born to take credit for certain recent economic developments, but the truth is that the government is more of a hindrance than a help. It is the product of the above-mentioned various economic actors that contribute to macroeconomic stability and not the much-vaunted government policy intervention. What we currently have in Guyana can be characterized as a case of public failure and private success. Secondly, I want to use this opportunity to bring to your attention a saying which goes like this, Mr. Speaker. Might is right until right gets ready. I want to repeat it. Might is right until right gets ready. What is important, sir, is the way in which governments use and abuse power, and the people's eventual response, which is inevitably vicious. Many governments, including this PDPC government, have a way of believing that because it controls the military apparatus of the state, they can and do use brutal measures to coerce citizens to obedience of their dictates. That only works for a while. History is replete with instances where the people, even after years of tyrannical behavior from ruling parties, have risen up and thrown off the yokes of tyranny in Guyana. In Guyana, the situation is not dissimilar. The crisis which is partly reflected in this budget requires an urgent solution. In this crisis, we have been presented with a wonderful opportunity not only to reflect on where we are, but to determine where we are going. Mr. Speaker, let us, even at this late hour, craft the kind of budget which will take Guyana beyond where it is. The consequences for this country, if this cannot be done, are too grave to consider. The people are waiting to hear from us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.